All right, what's up, everyone? Hope you all had a good weekend. This is gonna be a re-recording of demo two, because in the original recording on Wednesday, the audio wasn't working. I was muted for some reason. So I'm just gonna do a quick re-recording of demo two and just kind of explain all the stuff that we did on Wednesday. So first we're gonna do like a little file explanation. So we're going to be in app.py right now, which is on the screen. And so as you can see, this file is similar to the last demo, I guess the first one that Caduce did. And it has the endpoints that you should be familiar with from demo one as well as PA one. So we have the base endpoint, create tasks, get task, update task, and delete task. But we have this db.file, and this file is a bit different from what we saw in week one. So I guess we're just gonna go through it real quick. So this import OS thing, so OS is stuff that's gonna be in your operating system on your local computer. So whether that be the files or the environmental variables, which is something that we're gonna cover later. This is what the package is for. So this import OS thing. And then import SQLite 3. This is the library that we're going to be using to write SQLite 3 in. So next is this singleton function. To explain this, we're gonna kind of explain what this database driver object is. So the database driver is an object that basically represents the whole database. We only ever want one instance of it running because we don't want to be adding data to it from two separate ends. And so we're only going to want one database instance to be running at the same time. So this is what the singleton function does over here. It allows you to only get one instance of the class ever. So yeah. And then at the bottom, we see that we initialize the database driver and we pass it into the singleton function. And this ensures that we only have one connection to the database at one time. And so the database driver is also where we're going to be running the SQL code under, because this is the class that interacts with the database. So for the demo today, we're going to be starting with the database file, because the database file is going to define our table. And in general, we want, when creating a backend, you always want to start creating the tables before designing the routes, because you want to have a foundation of how your data is structured before you actually start implementing the logic on how to like interact with it. So this is why we're going to start with the database by defining what the table is going to look like first. So first, we're going to want to establish a connection to the database. So we're going to first define this init function to kind of establish or instantiate the database driver object. So we're going to have here. So first, we're going to do some documentation. So this is going to secure a connection with the database and stores it into the instance variable con. So we're going to do self.con. This is going to create a con variable. And we're going to do SQLite3.connect. And so there's going to be two parameters in here. The first is going to be the name of the database file. The app that we're going to be creating is a to-do app. So we're just going to call it to-do.db. And then our second parameter is going to be check same thread, or check same thread equals false. This prevents us from making multiple edits to the database at the same time. There's actually benefits of setting this thing to true, but for now, for the purposes of this course, we're just going to leave it as false. Yeah. So when we connect to the database, what is the first thing we're going to want to do? So we have this empty database file, and we're going to we want to actually start using it for our app. So the first thing we should probably want to do is create the tables that we're going to be using. So within the init method, we're going to write self.create task table. And this create task table function is what we're going to define next. So we're going to write create task table. And it's just going to take itself as a parameter. So using SQL, it creates a task table. So first we're going to do self.con.execute. And so to create our task table, we're just going to use the SQLite 3 commands that we just ran through the terminal in the first part of the demo. So the command for creating a table is simply create table. And so we're gonna add these few keywords over here, if not exists. So basically the point of a database is that when you're not running your code, it's already like stored, I guess, like in the ether, so that when you like rerun your server, you don't have to create it every single time, and it like preserves your data, right? So the thing is, you don't want to be creating a table every time you run your app, because you're going to be creating like multiple tables at the same, like you're going to have a table task when you first ran it, and then if you try and create it again, it's going to give an error. So you only want to create the table if it doesn't exist. So we're going to do create table if not exists, and then we're going to name it task. And so now we're going to add some fields. So we're first going to have the ID, which is our integer primary key. This is going to be our unique identifier, and we're going to use the auto increment function to do this. Our next field is going to be description, and this is going to be text, not null, because we're going to want each task to have some sort of description about what we want it to do. And then the last field is going to be this done variable, which indicates whether or not the task is completed. So Boolean, not null. Yeah. So yeah, to reiterate, every SQL field ends with a comma, and then every SQL command ends with a semicolon. So we're going to close the parentheses and then add a semicolon after here. So yeah. So yeah, the whole thing, the whole string is going to be passed into our execute function, which is going to create the task table. So basically this execute function executes this SQL command over here. So now, after creating this table, it's good practice to always have a delete task table method. So we're going to do delete task table. It's going to take itself as a parameter again. So we're going to do using SQL deletes a task table. So here what we're going to do is self.con.execute again to execute our SQL command. And the syntax for dropping a table is simply just drop the table. And then we want to drop it if it exists. So if exists, and then task. So we have these functions right now, and all of them run through our database. So yeah. So next we're going to move on to getting all tasks. This is like a standard, I guess, CRUD endpoint. So first, we're going to create a function in the database file, and then we're actually going to create a route in our app.py that references the function within the database file. So first thing we're going to do is define this function. So define get all tasks. And it's just going to take itself as a parameter. So using SQL returns all the tasks in a table. So here, what we're going to do is self.con.execute, and we'll have the SQL command select all from task as a string. And from the previous demo, we know that this command selects all the data from the task table. So next, the self.con.execute function doesn't return something that Python can interpret. So we have to store this in some variable. So we're going to call it cursor. And so the reason why we call it cursor is that it will return like a 2D array of information, like how it is in a spreadsheet. So like when you drag your mouse over, I guess, an Excel spreadsheet with kind of a column and a row, it's going to select everything within that. So that's why we're going to name our thing cursor, because we're kind of moving our mouse over kind of the Excel spreadsheet. So yeah. So then we're going to instantiate an empty tasks object. So tasks is just an empty list. So our spreadsheet has a bunch of rows, and each row represents one item in our database. So we're going to loop through our rows and then append that into our task list. And then we're going to return that task list, which is something that Python can understand. So we're going to do for row and cursor, we're going to do tasks.append. And then we're going to return this as a dictionary. So our ID field is going to be the first entry in our row. So there's going to be row of 0. Our description is going to be row of 1. Our done is going to be row of 2. And then after that, we return the tasks variable. So yeah, so now that we created the database and queried some information from the database using this get all tasks function, we can now write a route in our app.py that actually references this function. So first in our app.py, we need to import the database file. So we're going to do import db, and this allows us to reference the functions from our database file. So next, we're going to initialize the database driver. So we're going to do is write db equals db.database driver. And it just takes itself as a parameter. So we're just going to do that. And so, yeah, again, this is allowing us to use the function we just created in the database file. So now we're going to fill in this get tasks function over here. So we're going to do, so it's going to be the endpoint for getting all tasks. And so we're simply going to return json.dumps. And then we're going to return this as a dictionary. So tasks. And then we're going to call the function db.getAllTasks. And we're going to return it with a response code of 200. So now that we just wrote this function, we can go test it out in Postman. So yeah. Oh, so first we have to get our server running. So let me pull up the terminal over here. So we're going to have Python 3, create our virtual environment. This might take a little bit. Okay. So then we're going to do again v.bin/activate. And so now our virtual environment is activated. We need to install our requirements. So pip install recursively requirements.txt. And then lastly, we just run it using Python 3 app.py. So now our server is running, and so now we can go test out in Postman. So these are the Postman requests that we did from, I guess, the demo on Wednesday. So we're gonna hit. So this is the endpoint for our get all tasks thing. It's gonna be a get request, and yeah, so we just simply hit send, and we see that we have an empty tasks variable over here. We have no tasks in our database. So yeah, so now we're going to want to create a function so that we can get a task by its ID. So this is like pretty standard. It's going to help us implement the functions of create task and update task. So we're going to fill this in real quick. So we go back to our db.py file, and we're going to create a new function. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to create a new function, define get task by ID. And this is going to take itself and then also the task ID as a parameter. And so This is going to be using SQL gets a task by its ID. So we're again going to do self.con.execute, and we're going to make the SQL statement select all from table task where the ID is, okay, so when passing in parameters into a SQL statement, I guess in Python, we're gonna write question marks for the parameters that we're gonna represent. So we're gonna write a question mark here, and then a comma. We're gonna exit out of this string, and then we're gonna have ID over here with a comma. Or I think, yeah, this comma goes over here. And we end up with a semicolon. So what this does is that it passes the ID parameter into this question mark over here. So that is going to select all from task where your ID is the ID that we're passing in. And the reason why we have a comma here is this is technically a tuple. This is how Python passes stuff in, is through the tuple over here. So yeah, in the create task function, we're going to see how it's going to take in multiple parameters, and it'll make sense why there's going to be a comma here. So yeah, and then again, this is not interpretable by Python, so we're going to have to store in our cursor variable. And then we're going to do for row and cursor. We're going to return. So yeah, cursor is only going to have one row, since each task has a unique ID. So at most it's going to be one row. So we're going to do just return this as a dictionary again. So return ID is our first row entry, so row 0. Description is row 1. Done is row 2. Then after that, and if we don't have a task where its ID is the parameter that we pass in, we're simply going to return none. So now that we have that, we're going to go to our app.py file and fill in this get task method over here. So write some documentation, endpoint for getting a task by its ID. So we're going to have tasks equals, or task equals db.getTaskById. So we're calling this function. And then our parameter is simply going to be the task ID that we pass in. And so now we check if our task is none. We're going to we're going to return an error. So we're going to do return json.dumps error, and we're returning this as kind of a dictionary, and we're going to say task not found. And then if our task is indeed something, we're going to turn json.dumps task, and then response code of 200. And then this is going to be a response code of 404 because of the error not found. So yeah, so now we can go test this in Postman. I actually don't have a request for that, so let's make that real quick. We can duplicate this. We're going to name this get task by ID. So it's going to take in parameters in here. So let's say an ID of 1. We're going to send this in. And so, yeah, there's no tasks in our task table right now. So it's going to be an error task not found. So this is a good sign that our code is working right. So next, we're going to want to make a create task function so we can actually insert stuff into our database. So we're going to go back to our db.py file, and we're going to write function. So we're defining insert task table, and it's going to take itself, description, and done as parameters. Oh, my bad. Okay. Let me get this running again real quick. Oh, okay, that's weird. Oh, okay, never mind. Okay, so yeah, so it's active right now. Okay, we're good. So yeah, so now we're creating this function. So using SQL, this inserts a task into the task table. So we're gonna do self.con.execute, and the keyword to create a task is insert into table task, and we're gonna have parameters of description and done, and then we're gonna do the values keyword, and then again we're gonna pass in question marks for the parameters that we want to pass in. Let me quickly end this with string. Yeah, so then we're gonna have semicolon ends that SQL query, a comma, and then we're gonna pass in the parameters. So which are gonna be description and done. And yeah, that's all for this one. So now that we made a change into our database, we have to kind of save our changes. So we're gonna do self.con.commit. And yeah, so this command is the equivalent of saving information in the database. So for example, when you commit on GitHub, you're saving the files like locally on your computer. And so the commit function here just saves the changes that we made into our table or database. And we didn't have to do this in the past because we were only getting information and we weren't making any changes. So now after this, we're actually going to return the ID of the task that we just created. So we have to store this again in a cursor variable. And then this cursor variable has a attribute where you can return the last ID, or the ID of the last row in cursor, since the last row is going to be the new task that we just inserted. So we're going to do cursor or return cursor dot last row ID. So yeah, now that we implemented this on the database side, let's go implement this as a route in app.py. So we're gonna have our create task function, which is gonna be endpoint for creating a task. So we're gonna have our body, which is gonna be, we're gonna be loading it with the JSON, so JSON.loads, and then we're loading the request.data. And so our description is going to be the description field of the body. So body.get description. Then our done is going to be body.get done. And so next we're going to do task ID. So this is going to be the task ID of the thing that we're creating. So it's going to be db.insert task table description. So for our app, we're going to assume that every task you put into the database is not done, because there's really no point of putting it into a to-do app if you've already done something. So we're actually not going to use this parameter over here. And so we're going to set this as false, just as a default value. So yeah, and then this function returns the task ID of the thing that we're creating. So this is what this variable is going to represent. So then we're going to retrieve this task using the get task by ID function. So we're going to do task equals db.get task by ID. And we're going to pass in the task ID that we just got. And so we're going to say if the task is none, that means there was some error creating the task. So we're going to return json.dumps error creating a task, creating this task did not work. And then the response code for this one is going to be 400. And then if everything worked and we do have a valid task, we're just going to do return json.dumps. And it's going to be, we're going to return our task. and then response code of 201. So now let's go test this in Postman. So create task over here. One task I have to do is prepare lecture 3 and send this in. And so yeah, it returns a task that we just created. So if we do get all tasks, we're going to see that indeed we have this one task in our database. And then we see its ID is 1. So we can now test the get task by ID function. So here we have 1 in the endpoint, and we pass it in, and we see that we can retrieve this task. So let's create a few more tasks right now. So I have algo homework due Wednesday. So do algo homework. And then I'm going to exercise tomorrow. So we're going to put that in. Okay. So then again, get all tasks. We send this in, and we see that we have 3 tasks in our database. So let's say that I finish preparing lecture 3, and I want to update the status of this task. So we're going to go back to our database file and write a function to do this. So I'm going to do define update task by ID, and it's going to take in itself, a description, done, and also the ID of the task. So we're going to do, using SQL, updates a task in our table. So again, we're going to do self.con.execute. And so we're going to do, so update task. We're going to set the description equal to a parameter. So we're going to have question mark. And then also done. We're also going to have a question mark. And then where our ID is equal to the parameter that we pass in. So then we end it with a semicolon. And then after this, we have a comma, and then we pass in our parameter. So description, done, and ID. And now it makes sense that we have the commas here since this is a tuple. And so, yeah. And then since we made a change to our database, we have to do self.con.commit. And yeah. So now we're going to go to app.py and create the route for it. So we have our update task function here. So again, this is going to be an endpoint for updating a task. And so again, we're going to get the body. We're going to load the body. So body equals json.loads request.data. And then our description is going to be body.get description. And then done is going to be body.get done. And then we're going to do db.update task by ID, and we're going to pass in description, done, and then our task ID. And then now that we updated our task, we're going to get the task and return it. And so we're going to do this by using the get task by ID function again. So task equals db.get task, or get task by ID with the task ID. And if our task is none, then we return json.dumps error task not found. This is going to be response code of 404. And if it is something, return json.dumps task, and then a response code of 200. So yeah, so let's go test this on Postman now. So we're going to go to update tasks. So first we're going to look at the tasks we have. So let's say I indeed finished preparing lecture 3. So we're going to go to update task. We're going to go over here and say 1. So prepare lecture 3, and this is going to be true. So we're going to send this in. And we see that it returned the task with our done being 1. And in Python, 1 is true and 0 is false. And so if we do get all tasks, we see that this task is indeed done. We can also change the description of it. So prepare, we could do give lecture 3. And since I haven't given lecture 3 yet, we can set this again as false. And if we send that in, we see that our description changed and our done status also changed. And so we can see that by get all tasks. Yeah, we can see that over here. So now we know that our update task function works. So the last thing is deleting a task. So we're going to go again to our db.py file and create a function for this. So I'm going to define delete task by ID, and we're going to do self and the ID, the task ID. And so this is going to be using SQL deletes a task from a table. So again, we're going to do self.con.execute. And the delete keyword is just delete from table task, where our ID is the parameter that we're passing in. So we're going to have a question mark, semicolon to end it, and then a comma, and then we're passing in our ID. Then since we made a change to our database, we have to call self.con.commit again. And this is going to be a void function, so we're not going to be returning anything. And yeah, so now we're going to go to our app.py and write this function. So this is going to be the endpoint for deleting a task from the database. So we're going to have our task equals db.getTaskById, and we're going to pass in the task ID that we just have. So this is going to be the task that we're trying to delete. So if our task is none, then we can't really delete a task if it doesn't exist. So we're going to do return json.dumps. Again, an error message as a dictionary. So task not found, and a response code of 404 since error not found. And if indeed the task does exist, we're going to do db.delete task by ID, and it's going to be, we're passing in the task ID that we're passing in. And then we're going to return the task that we just deleted. So return json.dumps task, and then a response code of 200. So let's go test this in Postman. So we have our 3 tasks over here. Let's just send this in again. Yeah. So let's say I want to delete exercise since I might not exercise tomorrow. So we're going to go to delete task by ID. You see that it's 3. So we're going to go over here and we're going to send this in, and we see that it returned the task. So let's go to get all tasks, and we see that we only have 2 tasks left. So let's delete those with IDs of 2 and 1. So we have nothing in our task table left. So let's say we have 2, send this in, it returned this, and then 1. Oops. And so it returned this. And let's say we want to delete 1 again. We're going to have error task not found. And if we do get all tasks, we see that there's no tasks left in the table. And yeah, so that's all for the demo today. Yeah, thanks for bearing with me. It was a slight logistical error, but I hope I got it right this time. And yeah, good luck to PA2. Good luck to y'all doing PA2, and we will see you for week 3 on Monday. So yeah, take care.